Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm Umar Khalid. But today is the 3rd of December 2021. These are the stories that we will be talking about during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, by a senior diplomat of the Indian High Commission that was summoned to the Foreign Office to lodge a serious complaint about the mischievous spin that has been given by India and the Indian media about an incident that happened at the Gurdwara Sahib. As per the Foreign Office statement, that incident has been taken care of. But India continues, as it has in the past as well, to always try to give a negative image of Pakistan one way or the other, and that was conveyed to the senior diplomat. This is going to be our first story. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the nuclear talks that are going on between Iran and the other important nations. Of course, is the JCPOA. But the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has kind of played down the future of the nuclear deal by saying that in the next day or two we are going to know whether Iran actually intends to engage in good faith. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the United Nations that has appealed on Thursday for a 41 billion aid for countries that are in distress because of different issues, and of course the leading country that is in such a case is Afghanistan. There are other countries as well, Syria, Yemen, Ethiopia and Sudan, that are really under a lot of stress because of famine, because of the humanitarian and economic crisis that are engulfing the countries. The last story, ladies and gentlemen, of the day is about racism and how it has cropped up again in the wake of Omicron. Now, what has happened is that a lot of countries have blocked their airwaves as far as South African countries are concerned, but South Africa says, and South African media is saying, that in fact it is a kind of double attitude or hypocrisy towards the South African nations that has led to a certain blocking of flights from South Africa, which is going to lead to economic issues in those countries. Let's come to our first segment, first story and first segment, and of course that concerns the Indian senior diplomat that was summoned to the Foreign Office to lodge a serious complaint about the mischievous spin, what happened in Gurdwara Sahib. More in the following report.
Indian subversive designs against Pakistan have been periodically debunked, but its hegemonic aspirations compel it to make mockery of itself by botched plans. Despite Pakistan's momentous goodwill gesture that is inaugurating Kartarpur Corridor, the gateway to Baba Guru Nanak, and issuing of thousands of visas to Sikh pilgrims, India remains stubbornly hostile. Arrogantly discrediting Pakistan's dovish gestures, Hindu majoritarian BJP regime is desperately trying to manipulate an unfortunate individual at Gurdwara Darbar Sahib. While Federal Minister for Information and Broadcasting Chaudhry Fawad Hussain has censured the dress designer and model for modeling bareheaded at sacred place. New Delhi's shadowy record of gross and systematic persecution of minorities did not bar it to peddle mischievous fabrications against Pakistan by taking refuge under one isolated incident. Pakistan has summoned a senior diplomat from Indian High Commission to convey the categorical rejection of India's response to the recently surfaced incident. As Hindutva Indian regime persists in systematic marginalization and brutalization of minorities, Pakistan accords the highest primacy to the rights of minorities and sanctity of religious places, and revered sites of every community is ensured in the country. From Pakistan's perspective, the Kartarpur Corridor is a confidence-building measure in the politically strained and historically charged relationship between India and Pakistan that successfully won the hearts of Sikh community worldwide.
Now, to talk more about this incident, we've been joined by Amir Abdullah, who's a foreign affairs expert. Amir, thank you very much to have joined us. Amir, how do you see the different spins that have been given by India, not only about this incident in Gurdwara Sahib, but also about the previous incidents that try to malign Pakistan, put Pakistan in a bad light? When and how can India stop doing this?
Thank you, Umar, for inviting me. This is a very dangerous development for me, and mainly I think this is because of the 3 points that make the behavior and the reaction from India a very dangerous phenomena. And first of all, because of the duplicity of behavior by Indian state and Indian government as well as their society. Secondly, this is because it makes Kartarpur corridor and the whole initiative of peace controversial. It's a very malign. It's an attempt to malign the whole phenomena of peace building between two nuclear armed neighbors. And thirdly, because it reflects an evil nexus, according to me. That evil nexus it exists between Indian government and Indian media, where both are taking extreme fascist or extreme rightist turns. So why it's a dangerous phenomenon? First of all, as I mentioned, the duplicity of behavior by Indian media and Indian government. If you look at Indian state, I was just going through a report a few days ago where United Nations Commission for Religious Freedom, it mentioned that the Indian government's policies, they mainly target the minorities over there and primarily Muslim minorities over there. If you look at the situation of religious freedom in India and the conditions of
Of
minority
course,
and the
we all
places
know
of
all the
worship.
different incidents that have been happening, and this is, for me, a diversionary tactic from India to divert all of that attention towards Pakistan.
Yes, that's what I say, that this duplicity of behavior is that they want to divert whatever they are doing at home, and they want to present their neighbors in the same color, whereas it's evident that how the places of Sikh worship and even Hindu worships are being protected and preserved by the Pakistani government. It was just yesterday the Pakistani government has allowed Hindu pilgrims to visit Pakistan, whereas many Muslim pilgrims, their visa applications are still on hold by Indian government. So this duplicity of behavior, this is not at
This
all,
is your first point. You talked
positive
duplicity
development.
as the first point of the 3 points. What is the second and third point?
Yes,
Amir?
the second point, I think that this attempt will make the Kartarpur corridor initiative a controversial initiative, a controversial thing. It's an attempt. We know from the day one when Pakistani government announced opening of this corridor,
There was a lot of
government
apprehension
did
from the
not
Indian
take it
side.
happily. Yeah, they did their best to delay it, and they did their best to neutralize the positive impact of this initiative. Now, if such an incident has happened, obviously it's a sorry thing that should not have happened, and we have seen much a positive response from the personnels involved over there, and also the company that was involved in that. They have apologized for their lack of knowledge about the sanctity of the place.
Even the
Yet,
Foreign Office took notice of that, Amir. If you remember
exactly,
very well, a few
exactly,
days
our
on
Foreign Office,
Tuesday.
yes, our Foreign Office took notice. The regional, the district authorities, they also took notice of it, and definitely they are taking measures to prevent such sad happenings in the future. Yet, the whole spin by the Indian government of the whole matter and their media is that they want to make this initiative a controversial. This will bring nothing good for the regional peace. But what an extremist government can get out of it is that they can justify their actions and whatever they are doing against their minorities. They will use again such covers to divert attention from there and make the whole initiative controversial. And if this becomes a success, we can have further more initiatives like this. But by highlighting them in media in their negative light, I think they are closing the doors, or they want to close the doors for future initiatives of this kind in future. And the third point is that this whole behavior by Indian government, it reflects that there exists a very dangerous and I would say an evil nexus between Indian government and Indian media. We have seen how the fascist regimes work. Media and propaganda serve as their primary tool. Now, the way an incident has been taken up by the whole media, and if you just go through their different media outlets and their online newspapers, they all have joined the same course, and they are united. So instead of media playing a positive role of peace building and media bringing the two nations together, that is what we see, that how what we expect from a democratic liberal media. But unfortunately, this is a reflection that media and society in India are
Now, Amir,
democratic.
you've given these 3 very important points: duplicity, and of course this nexus between the media and the government, and the third point as well. Now, these 3 points are very important. These 3 points are also understood by Pakistan and the Pakistani government. Now, as far as rebuttal of all of this is concerned, how strong, in your point of view, should Pakistan's response be? We have summoned the senior Indian diplomat to stop the, as they say, this mischievous spin on what is happening, what happened at the Gurdwara Sahib. But should, in your point of view, the Pakistani response be stronger, or maybe some action need to be taken in such a way that such incidents are not repeated in the future?
Definitely, at home we must be doing a lot after this incidents, because the spoilers are there, and unfortunately, in this situation, the government, Indian government itself, is the biggest spoiler for any possibility of peace between two nations. So, what can be done exactly? We need to educate our people. Unfortunately, we don't have a big majority of. A big number of Sikh minority in Pakistan, so they are confined to a few places. So most of the people, they are probably unaware of the customs and how they have to how they should be visiting the religious places of other minorities. But this is very not a complicated thing. Social media and our media is active, and we have seen a very positive response from our social media users as well, and our media outlets as well, that they have been trying to educate the people through these incidents, and that's what can be done very easily. And overall, our masses, they are loving, and they are compromising and very, very welcoming to the other faiths. So at our local level, this is an important thing: education of media that can be done. In addition, we also have our Pakistani media also has an important role to play, though our presence on international arena is not as strong as that of Indian media presence. Yet, once the voices will rise from here, and they will show the positive and the real picture of the situation on ground, that will make a better impact outside, I think.
Amir, it's very strange because you pointed that out as well, as far as the way the minorities are treated in both the countries. If we do systematic, parallel between the minorities in India and in Pakistan, we would exactly know where the answer tilts towards. But what do you feel Pakistan should also do as far as the situation of the minorities in India is concerned? Because that situation is, if I could put it in one word, pathetic.
It is pathetic, Umar, and when it's India and Pakistan thing, one thing things become very sensitive. Pakistan taking up an issue and talking about human rights issues and religious freedom problems in India, it becomes easy for international community to look at such claims with suspicions, keeping in view the enduring rivalry that we have with India. So I suggest that it is not the sole responsibility of Pakistan. It is the responsibility of international community altogether, because the world's largest democracy yielding into something like extremist Hindutva, fascist regime, it is not in the benefit of the whole world. Democracy, liberal freedom, and religious freedom in India will serve Pakistan, and it will serve the whole world. So, a better India is need of the whole world. What we can do is that it is important for us to use our diplomatic channels and convey this strong message to India, that to the world, that a democratic media in India and a democratic government in India is all what everyone would aspire for. And our diplomatic channels, our embassies, as well as the media, they share the responsibility in this regard. And lastly, how we see the modern social media world, the social media users, the people here, the ordinary Pakistanis, they also have the power. They have Twitter, they have Facebook with them. So these are the things which can be used to highlight that what is happening over there and how it is critical and how it is dangerous for the world's peace altogether.
Also, finally, Amir, do you also feel that we should propagate our image more strongly and more aggressively abroad and through our media as to what measures our government is taking as far as our minorities are concerned, and also as far as interfaith harmony is concerned?
Yes, if we see, our Prime Minister has been very vocal about the situation, and he has been speaking about the duty of the state to protect the minorities and the weaker sections of the society. So yes, that is one thing that we have been doing as a whole. In addition, if we see, our Foreign Office has been regularly briefing the world about what we have been doing. And whenever there are instances like this, like today, we gave a strong rebuttal to it. So overall diplomatic efforts, I am quite satisfied with them. But keeping in view the magnitude of problem on the other side of the border, everything will somehow becomes insufficient, because the level of extremism and that bigotry over there it is massive that we all what we can do is to keep on doubling the efforts that are being done by our state at the moment.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you very much, Amir Abdullah, Foreign Affairs expert, who have joined us, to have talked to us about this mischievous spin among so many other spins that India has been giving as far as Pakistan is concerned, and of course trying to manipulate different countries into thinking that Pakistan is not doing things right when Pakistan in fact is going in the right direction, especially when it concerns minorities and interfaith harmony. Let's go to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, and our second story concerns the JCPOA and the talks that are going on between Iran and the important countries. Now, Anthony Blinken, who's the Secretary of State, has said that he is a bit cautiously optimistic as far as the future of this deal is concerned, and he says that the next day or two will ascertain where this deal or these talks are in fact going. More in the following report.
United States has expressed pessimism about the chances of reviving the landmark 2015 Iran nuclear deal, days after Vienna negotiations kick-started to break the ice between Iran and Western powers. At a time when diplomatic efforts to revive the moribund Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action reached a critical juncture, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that U.S. had little cause for optimism given Iran's recent moves and rhetoric. Washington's pessimistic speculation surfaced after revelations from the United Nations nuclear watchdog indicated that Iran has started producing enriched uranium with advanced centrifuges. Commenting on the unfolding developments, Iran's top diplomat Hossein Amir emphasized that negotiations in the Austrian capital are proceeding with seriousness and that the removal of sanctions is a fundamental priority. Underlining its commitment to revive the multilateral understanding, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran provided the European powers involved in the deal with 2 drafts on sanctions removal and nuclear commitments. Meanwhile, Israel has augmented its opposition to Vienna talks and pressing world powers to halt the nuclear negotiations immediately. The talks aimed at reviving the battered 2015 nuclear deals between Iran and several world powers, Britain, China, France, Germany, Russia, and indirectly with the United States, resumed after 5 months' pause following the election of President Ibrahim Raisi.
Now, of course, the round of talks between Iran and the important countries for the revival of the JCPOA are going on in Vienna as we speak, and there has been a lot of pressure from certain countries so as not to pursue this deal, whether it be Israel that has been talking to all the different important countries, whether it be the US, whether it be United Kingdom. And we talked yesterday also about the British Foreign Secretary, who had laid down certain reservations about the deal, especially after meeting her Israeli counterpart. Now the US also gives the same kind of an impression as to being cautiously optimistic about the future of the deal, where it was in fact Joe Biden's government that wanted to pursue a revival of this nuclear deal. Syed Muhammad Ali, Director CAS, joins us online. Ali, thank you very much to have joined us. Ali, what do you foresee as far as the JCPOA is concerned?
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to join you. I think it's a very important global and regional issue. And the signs are not very positive because it seems that the positions between the Western powers and Iran are gradually hardening. And the hope that the Biden administration's arrival into office will revive the deal with Iran immediately have so far not yielded any significant or tangible progress. And the reason for that is because Iran also has a new government, and it also expects greater concession and relief in terms of economic mainstreaming of Iran in one go.
All right. Now, Ali, when it comes to uranium enrichment and Iran, there have been different reports and countries putting their reservations as to Iran increasing its uranium production or enrichment. What do you say about that, and do you feel that is going to impact the future of the JCPOA as well? Because this is what the countries are saying.
Absolutely. It's an important development. But you need to see this deal in a historical context because basically, this was a deal which was underwritten and endorsed by the United Nations Security Council. So it's not just a bilateral or a multilateral arrangement. but it is supported by the United Nations Security Council, and it has practically 7 parties: P5, Germany, and also Iran. And most countries, despite the 2018 unilateral withdrawal by the US under the previous administration, the other sides are still committed to the deal. But the problem is, because of the huge influence of the US, Iran, despite its commitment to the deal, has not received the economic relief that this deal essentially promised. And that has forced Iran to gradually, push back. And there is also domestic political factors, because of domestic political reasons, they have upped the ante and also resumed the production of the enrichment. And they also are more demanding and taking a more maximalist position in terms of expecting a blanket and total economic relief, which the Western powers are reluctant to offer at this point in time.
But Ali, you know very well that the US never wanted to give a blanket relief to Iran, even despite Joe Biden going forward as to the revival of the JCPOA. And there were certain sanctions that they wanted to continue to impose on Iran despite that. But Iran wanted a complete, blanket revival of that deal. In all of that context, there's also the European Union, there's also Russia, there is also the United Kingdom, there's also France that has certain reservations. The United Kingdom also said, the Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom also gave a certain comment that was skeptical as far as the future of this deal is concerned. Russia is kind of optimistic, the EU isn't. America says that it wants to pursue it, let's see in the day or two, but at the same time there's the pressure by Israel, which America has refused to comment on. Where is all of this political jingoism or jingo? I mean, there is too much of political maneuvering as far as this deal is considered. Where is all of this going in your point of view as an analyst?
Absolutely. I think you've rightly and comprehensively laid out the whole canvas of this complex issue, because it has a global scope, it has a regional context, and it also affects, unfortunately, and plays out heavily in the domestic politics within the US as well as Iran. And so at the global level, basically the 3 power centers are competing and cooperating in different ways. One is China and Russia, which take a somewhat sympathetic view of Iran's nuclear program and do not share the grave concerns which are expressed by the US and Israel. But the European Union is somewhat has a more balanced approach. They are closely aligned with the US, but also are still committed to the deal. But the 3 factors which are unfortunately affecting or reducing and retarding the progress of this deal are the domestic politics of the US, the domestic politics of Israel, and domestic politics of Iran. The Jewish lobby has a lot of influence in the US, which is trying to discourage any progress. Same is the case with Israel, and which continues to issue threats that they have kinetic options available to, and they have also, there are allegations that some Iranian scientists have been assassinated by Israel. So these things make it a very complex and delicate issue, and this requires a lot of wisdom, comprehensive and consistent approach if some revival is to be expected.
Ali, it's very interesting the word you use, wisdom. Do you feel that the powers that be really have that?
I think they all have that, but how much they exercise it, unfortunately, is constrained by 2 factors. One is the global geopolitical competition that you see between US, Russia, and China, which is also affecting the divergent approaches towards this issue. The second is obviously the domestic politics, because the new government in Iran also takes a skeptical view and is less keen to offering greater concessions, as was the case with the previous administration. And similarly, the Biden administration unlike the initial expectations, is not as forthcoming or as eager to return to the deal as was initially expected.
All right. So, Ali, in all of this, there's also another factor that is involved, that is the IAEA. Now, IAEA, one of their comments of late, has said that Iran is making nuclear advances despite talks to salvage the 2015 deal. So, there's also this little apprehension by the IAEA as well. So, do you feel the same factors that are behind I'm not saying using the word sabotaging, because that is a very harsh word, but trying to delay any possible outcome of these talks are the same factors that are also involved behind the IAEA?
Absolutely, because IAEA is most people understand it as the international watchdog, a subsidiary organization of the UN system regarding the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. However, it is not, independent of the international geopolitics, and whatever decisions are taken are influenced by the global politics. And Iran also recognizes that, and this resumption of uranium enrichment is Iran's way of putting pressure on the Western Bloc that if you do not offer me timely and complete economic relief, then I'll have no option but to also review my commitment to the towards IEA.
All right, Ali, which brings me to the outcomes of these talks. What if these talks are not successful and Iran continues to enrich its uranium? You remember well that the United Kingdom of late had given a very strong statement that they will not let Iran make a nuclear bomb, and these are the apprehensions that the powers that be in the West have as far as Iran's nuclear program is concerned. What is going to happen if Iran continues to enrich its uranium and these talks are not fruitful?
There are three things, Omar. First is that you must recognize that Iran is a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So Pakistan's consistent stance on Iran's nuclear program has been that we expect all parties to adhere to their legal and political commitment and resolve all their disputes through peaceful diplomatic means. However, I think that Iran will remain committed to the NPT regime because, any departure from NPT would bring such immense economic, political, and security consequences that may not be in Iran's interest. I see the current revival of the enrichment program and also a maximalist demand of blanket economic relief as hard bargaining by Tehran. They realize that the Western concern towards their progress of nuclear program is there, and in order to force them to review there or show some concession and flexibility in terms of economic relief can only be extracted if they realize that they don't have much time.
All right, but if they don't have much time, Ali, and the attitudes towards both the sides is hardline, do you feel there will be any concession by any of the sides at any point during these talks?
Umar, I think there are practically five sides to this agreement. China and Russia, like I earlier pointed out,
yes, of course, are sympathetic towards Iran.
Stance. Exactly. They are more sympathetic, and they also see Iran as a large market. You must recognize that the Iran's, as a signatory of NPT, emphasizes its right of peaceful users of nuclear energy and nuclear technology. And Russia sees Iran as a market for future peaceful users of nuclear technology. So that is why they take a different stance from what is popularly and mainly reported in terms of the Western concerns. So with the growing international strategic competition, I think what Iran is doing is trying to benefit from the sympathy from Beijing and Moscow in order to put greater pressure, not through just enrichment, but also to force the West that showing economic relief and giving economic relief is the only option because of the close relations with Moscow
That is so true. You know,
they're
Ali, this is a
they may
very
not even
complex.
have.
This is a very complex diplomatic game that is being played right now during these talks with a lot of aggressive attitudes from both sides. But all we want is that some kind of a resolution is made, some kind of a solution comes out of these talks so that this deal gets revived and the sanctions that have been put on Iran, if not completely as is asked by Iran, but to a large extent are removed so that Iran can also heave a sigh of relief as far as all these economic sanctions that had been put on it since such a long time. Let's come to our last few stories, ladies and gentlemen. The first is the United Nations that is seeking 41 billion US dollars for aid to different hotspots across the world where there are a lot of issues. I mean, starting with Afghanistan, Ethiopia, then there is Syria, Yemen and Sudan. Now these are countries that are plagued with a lot of issues. Let's begin with Afghanistan. We know the humanitarian economic crisis that is going on there, and this is what the world is extremely concerned about. Now the United Nations also says that the aid needs to reach very quickly to Afghanistan before it's too late, because if it does not, then it's going to be a huge crisis, a crisis that has already begun in that country. Then also there is Ethiopia, where a year-old conflict between the government and the Tigrayan forces has spread into different regions, and thousands have been displaced, and because of that there is drought, there are locusts, and there are so many other issues that are plaguing that country. And then the other countries, Syria, Yemen, and Ethiopia, and of course I've talked about Ethiopia, but Sudan as well, where there are a lot of floods going on, and our engineers are also helping in South Sudan. Now let's hope that this aid gets to the right countries, to these hotspots at the right time before it's too late. Our last story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Omicron. Now Omicron, as you very well know, is the new variant of the COVID-19. Now, what South Africa and South African countries are saying, that is a lot of racism that is at play when it comes to Omicron and the conditionalities that have been put related to Omicron, because of, as you know, it has emerged in South African countries and in South Africa, and from there it went to other countries. But so what South Africa is saying, that there is a persistence of racism which is evident once again with the blaming and shaming of African nations for this Omicron variant of the coronavirus. This is the health advocate Dr. Joia Creer-Perry who said this in a statement on Wednesday, and she also was talking on a panel on racial disparities in black maternal health care, and this is where she talked about this issue and how it is segregating the South African countries in a very negative manner by the other countries because of this Omicron variant. And she says, as per what she's saying, that this needs to stop because more than 50 countries have implemented travel measures to guard against Omicron. Many of them have banned their travelers from traveling to the South African countries. Let's see how all of this plays out. Nevertheless, we understand also the perspective of the South African countries. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah on Monday. Today is Friday, the end of the week, but I'll end with a very important note. I was just talking about Omicron. We need to be extremely careful. We know that 50 plus and the immunocompromised and the health workers have been told to get their booster shots. Kindly get your booster shots at the earliest. If you haven't gotten yourselves vaccinated, get yourselves vaccinated at the earliest and continue following the SOPs whether you are vaccinated or not. With that, we end this week's last episode. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with new stories and segments. Take care of yourselves. Allah Hafiz and have a great weekend.